I was fully marginalized,
Mm.
devalued, diminished. And it was in that moment that I made the decision that there's a choice here. I don't have to accept this.
Yeah.
I have to believe in myself more than anyone else believes in me. And that is a life lesson. Like, we alone set the boundaries and we alone set the standards for how others see us and treat us and love us and respect us. We set that standard. We are needed more than ever now to create the safe containers, to create the safe spaces, and to initiate the conversations and to role model the importance of emotional connection and love and safety and belonging.
Welcome to the Global Affair podcast, brought to you by Love Out Loud, the world's largest love-based movement, actualizing a civilization of love by 2030. My name's Nicole Gibson, and join me and some of the world's brightest minds as we bring some of the most important and controversial conversations of our time into a space of unity. It's important to know that as your host, this isn't about my personal opinion or bias, but rather an opportunity to listen with love, honesty, curiosity, and reveal the true universal experience us humans have amongst the differences. So if you love the show, please let us know by giving us a rating and tell us how to make this conversation easier for other people to jump into as well. And with that, let's get it.
Marissa Levin, welcome to the Global Affair. It's a pleasure to host you here. I know we've done a few collaborations at Global Unity Summit and other content collaborations, but the Global Affair is really the space to dive into globally relevant conversations. And I can't tell you how globally relevant I think the idea of conscious leadership is right now.
Yep.
So I think that's a great place to start. You know, who is Marissa Levin and what is her, what legacy is she leaving on the planet at the moment?
So the legacy that I'm leaving, I've created a lifetime legacy mission, which is something I made up. And it is to empower 1 billion people to live their most joyful lives. And I do that through the path of personal development as well as leadership development.
1 billion people. So that's really no small goal. What was it about your journey that led you to own a mission like that?
That's such a great question. So a couple things. We all teach what we must master. That's the first thing. Through my own personal and leadership experiences, I definitely have learned that the shadow and the dark is definitely as much a part of our journey as the light. We need the shadow to be able to have light. And for me, my whole being, my whole essence has always been one who wants to help others alleviate suffering. I mean, I walk around with a bleeding heart. My heart's on my sleeve. I feel compassion for the world. And I know that I'm blessed with the gifts of communication, with a great stealth strategic mind, and also a very deep spiritual calling. And so I combine all of them to be able to help others really step into their most joyful lives. And for leaders, that's how do they find the joy in leadership and how do they build joyful companies? But I don't only want to be limited to leaders. I mean, I want everyone that can have access to me to be able to live a more joyful life.
So historically, you were an entrepreneur, right? You've run businesses over the years. And part of being an entrepreneur, I think anyone that is can understand, is learning how to be good with people, learning how to build meaningful relationships, learning how to see people and get the best out of people. Was it these experiences through building your business that led you to become passionate about this idea of ensuring that we have a world that's empowered and conscious and strong, or was it some other motive over the years that's been driving that vision you have?
I think so. A couple of things about that question. I think for me personally, I've always been that person that wants to lift others. I mean, since I was little, I've always been that person that gets so much joy out of seeing others really shine and be joyful. But regarding the entrepreneurial journey, for me over the last 30 years, and I find that even as I'm going into my 57th year, I'm in my 57th year, I definitely feel like I'm just getting started. Like, I feel like everything that I have built and learned and created over the last 30 years occurred for the sole purpose to prepare me for where I am right now, to truly elevate into my highest calling and my highest level of life. I view the entrepreneurial journey as one vehicle for awakening, for spiritual awakening, for really knowing who we are, for peeling back all of those layers of our own onion to really understand who we are inside. Me personally, my journey happens to have been entrepreneurship and will continue to be entrepreneurship as I continue to learn about myself. So I wouldn't say that entrepreneurship came into my life because I want to lift others. I think I've just been that person. That's, they say your dharma or your karma becomes your dharma, right? So for me, my karma definitely has evolved into my dharma to be able to lift others and help them be more joyful.
I mean, that's an interesting point. When this was playing out as the karma in your life, maybe earlier on, what did that look like?
It was difficult.
Mm.
I've been through a lot of trials and tribulations, personally and professionally, over the last 30 years that have really kind of pushed me to dig deep and really know who I am and to trust the larger picture, right? To trust the process, to know that the universe has so much more in store for us in every moment that we can possibly envision for ourselves. So it's just being connected to that, the larger world around us, the larger consciousness, right? We were talking about conscious leadership and consciousness. For me, I have always kind of had that connection to a larger consciousness, understanding that there's something so much larger than I am, and that even in the difficulties, if I can just push through, the reasons and the lessons that are meant for me are going to eventually come through. And that's what's happened.
Mm. I really want to I'm excited to dive into, what conscious leadership, what emotionally intelligent leadership looks like in the way that you teach it, the way that you facilitate. Before we do that though, I'd love you to share with us, a bit more of an insight into your personal story, especially around this point of, your karma turning into your dharma. That's something I really relate to, your pain into your purpose.
Yeah.
And the real life story, right? Because it's inspiring, I think, for people to hear that was your journey through that. Because for so many people who are in the thick of, I guess, feeling like karma's playing out in their life, that they're not the captain of their own destiny,
Right.
it can feel so out of reach to imagine a life where that actually becomes, not only something they're grateful for, but something that actually catalyzes, a fulfilling and inspiring life. So going back, you said you're 57 now. If you were to go back to 17, and you're looking forward towards your life, what was going on for Marissa at that point?
So, Nicole, you and I, we've worked together a lot. And one thing that I'm always amazed at is the synchronicity and the timing of when things come together for us. And this is actually a do-over, right? Because we recorded the first time and,
Wasn't the one.
yeah, it wasn't the one, right? And I remember when you came to me and you asked about it, and I'm like, of course I'll redo it. Like, obviously that wasn't the one that was supposed to be out there, right? Like, this is the one. So the fact that you're asking me about my younger self, I'm going to share with you something that happened, which is like crazy.
Great.
So, I have two sons who are 23 and almost 27. And I'm very transparent about what my situation is. I was married for almost 30 years. And in 2020, I evolved out of that marriage and ended that. And that was what had to happen. And I'd say like 8 weeks ago, I decided to take all of the videotapes that we had recorded from when our kids were younger and take them into a shop and have them converted to digital format so that my children could have all of their history on film. Okay. And they could see their lives growing up. So I got them back last week and I was watching them. And so I was able to see life even before kids. And I was able to see my 22 and 23-year-old self.
Wow.
And you just asked me about like reconnecting with that person around that age. Okay.
Amazing. So
How,
maybe
and
start
I have
with
goals.
how
I have
that
goals
felt.
that you just asked me that.
Mm.
So I was talking with a friend about it yesterday. And and when I was watching it, I watched it a couple of times. I have so much compassion for that woman, that young woman that I saw, because in that moment, Nicole, she had no idea how beautiful she was inside.
Mm.
And she did not have the courage or the self-love or the self-worth to exercise her voice.
Mm.
She didn't. She was timid. She didn't stand up for things that she felt she deserved or were right.
Mm.
And she was certainly not in her power at all. And I can just tell from what I witnessed that she was suppressing herself and she was living from a place of fear rather than a place of power or confidence. And I had so much compassion for the younger version of myself. So
Mm.
I'm not just answering your question hypothetically.
Yeah.
I just witnessed it.
Right. So that's amazing and also not surprising. And could you feel the things that she was feeling when you were watching those videos? Like were you able to transport back to that time
I could. It
in
was
your
more than 30 years and it was as if it happened yesterday.
it's like that? Yeah,
Yep.
wow. And
Yep.
and in that, were you able to kind of feel aspects of you that have been unchanging as well as the parts of you that have transformed and
I
evolved?
did.
Yeah.
I did. I, I've just always lived from my heart
Mm.
and I've always lived from a place of wanting peace and harmony. And this is getting back to where your karma becomes your dharma, because I'm going to answer that question.
Mm.
But as I looked at her, I saw that too, that I chose to suppress my voice because I wanted to keep the peace and I wanted calm and I, just accepted what was. And because I'm that person who loves harmony, right? Like I want everybody to feel joy. I want everyone to feel peace, inner peace.
Mm.
And so my dharma or my karma, what my karma has been is to be one that keeps the peace. And I was conditioned with that growing up.
Mhm.
I grew up, my parents were divorced. And so I always felt pulled and I felt that I could never make anyone happy. And so I was conditioned even back then to keep the peace, right? I wanted to make sure that that no one was suffering, no one was feeling pain. And so I kind of carried that all through. And I grew up in a household where my parents, until I was 13, and then there was a split, but my parents fiercely, fiercely loved me. Like I never had any doubt about that. But living with my mother primarily, the way that she loved, and I actually just talked with someone about this week, the way that a person loves us is not an indication of how much they love us, right?
Mm.
And so people do the best they can, and they bring into their relationships things that they learned from past relationships, right? So she learned how to love from her parents who fiercely loved her. And she brought that to me. And it was even though she unconditionally loved me forever, she conditionally loved me a
Mhm.
lot. And so when you're raised in that environment, you bring that into your adult environment and you don't want to rock the boat. It's not safe to rock the boat. You want to keep the peace. And so I brought that then into my relationships. Right. And
Yes.
so I saw that young woman on the video of myself. That's who I saw.
Mm.
And it was, yes, she was the same spirit of just wanting to live from love.
Yeah.
But she was also broken.
Mm.
And that manifested in who she was at that moment. And so for me, also knowing what I'm certified in the Enneagram and I'm a full 2. like I'm a helper, I'm a pleaser, and knowing how unhealthy Enneagrams number twos show up in the world for all the work that I have done and my knowledge of the Enneagram, I have been able to move from unhealthy to healthy through a lot of inner work and a lot of self-awareness. And I'm trained in positive intelligence. And I know that my top three are pleaser, conflict avoider, and victim. And again, that gets down to all of the extensive inner work I've done. And so I know I have the tools through my own learning of how to rise above those and how to quiet those inner critics. And then just coming into my own through my own spiritual path. So this is how my karma has become my dharma, right? My knowledge of who I am at my core and how I'm bringing this level of consciousness to the world through my dharma and to elevate self-love. And now that I've seen that video, it really ignited something within me about like wanting to make sure that the younger women really understand the importance of self-love and self-worth because it drives every decision that they make.
Right. I'm curious too, how did, if there was any, I guess, view at that time in your life, how did that version of Marissa view leadership? What was her opinion about leadership, the leadership in the world? Was this something that she thought about? Because I'm conscious of the fact that within a pretty short period of time, I'm assuming from when those videos were taken, you started your journey of
I did.
stepping into leadership. So, bring us into that a little bit.
Yeah, interesting. So the reason that I started my first company more than 30 years ago was because, ironically, it was my mom who taught me that you never let anyone else determine your value or your worth. And my previous boss had told me that I would never be worth more than $34,000 to his company when I went in and asked for a raise that was based on a business case, right? My education, how much they were making on me, my level of experience, my industry, lots of things that it was not just an arbitrary number. And he told me I would never be worth more than $34,000. So I was learning about leadership, even past my master's degree in organizational development. I was learning about leadership regarding like what I didn't want from my life, right? I didn't want to work for someone who didn't value me. I didn't want to work for someone who didn't see me. And so when I started my first company, the first thing I did is I created core values, and it was all about creating psychologically safe environment, which back then that
Yeah,
wasn't
no one
even
was
a
talking
thing,
about. Yeah.
right? Like psychologically safe environment, culture, those weren't things then, right? Like now they're very well known and talked about. But for me, I just knew that I wanted to create an environment where when I eventually was going to have people that worked for me, that they were going to feel valued because I had experienced what it was like to not feel valued in my previous company. And that's really what started my journey of 30 years of leadership and entrepreneurship.
So was that the moment really that you started to have opinions about leadership? Like when you felt kind of shut down about
Yeah.
your boss, was that kind of
Yeah.
the moment where you were like, wow, leaders have a power in our lives that is, it's important the way that's treated and held and understood.
Absolutely. I was fully marginalized,
Mm.
devalued, diminished. And it was in that moment that I made the decision that there's a choice here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to accept this.
Yeah.
I have to believe in myself more than anyone else believes in me. And that is a life lesson. Like
Mm.
we alone set the boundaries and we alone set the standards for how others see us and treat us and love us and respect us. We set that standard. Nobody else.
Yeah, I mean, what I think's great and really awesome about this example is it's a moment that I think many people can relate to, and just
Mhm.
remembering that we have a choice in that these moments can actually be a catalyst for something so much greater in our life if we actually tap into the truth of what a situation where we feel rejected or marginalized or dismissed, how that then makes you feel. And in most cases, there is, something that rises up in us in those moments. What do we do with that energy? Do we become resentful and bitter? Or do we take control of our
Yeah.
lives and actually decide, okay, this is not the environment for me. This space is not the space that I'm going to grow. So what am I going to do now? And, what I love about what you're sharing is you weren't coming from, this space of your own development where you were already really confident and, like gutsy as an entrepreneur. This was coming from a place, as you just kind of described, where you were still challenging, you were still being challenged with your own self-worth and your own self-love, and you were doing it anyway. And I think that there's something that so many of us can take from this story and this example, that a leader, and I've always kind of believed this, and although some qualities are innate, a leader is made, made through the decisions they make. And what kind of happened next in that story for you?
So I launched my own company, and I remember I got my first contract, which was a 3-month contract for $35,000. So it was $1,000 more than what I was told I was worth.
Yeah.
And, there's a whole journey about how I built the company after that. But yeah, I mean, I naturally became a servant leader. Again, like, the way I'm wired and who I've always been has been to lift others. And so when I started having employees, I embodied the servant leadership model, which is a model designed by a man named Robert Greenleaf, where basically you flip the organizational pyramid on its head so that the person at the top, quote unquote top, is actually at the bottom, lifting everybody else and in the position of serving them so that they have what they need to be successful. So I carried that all the way through to my adult life. And I think for me, where my own growth has come is knowing those boundaries to put in place where, yes, I want to do for others and serve others, but at what expense? And so that's just been a life lesson, personally and professionally, that I have had to learn. And I think finally, coming into where I am now, I think I finally am getting it right. So, which is great.
It's a long journey. It takes patience.
Well, it's completely, like I said, entrepreneurship and leadership, these are vehicles for awakening and self-awareness. They're just one of the vehicles that this curriculum of life gives us in order to awaken. And every relationship in our life, Nicole, is here specifically to teach us about ourselves. Like everything in our life teaches us about ourselves, our experiences, our relationships. Every single thing in our life is a mirror. Every single thing.
Yeah, it's beautiful, I think, to pull from this higher perspective on a journey like entrepreneurship, where things can sometimes feel so chaotic. What then becomes the guiding principles of how you process really stressful times, process, radical change in your life that can come from the journey of entrepreneurship as well. I think you and I connect on that point, that we both see it through somewhat of a spiritual lens, that there's a bigger picture playing out, which
Such a
allows
bigger picture.
Yeah, it's when things aren't going the way that you want them to, gives you that kind of perspective. And this actually feeds into my next question for you is, how do you define your personal philosophy of leadership? And I know that it includes these spiritual aspects.
So this is why I'm so drawn and I'm so happy that conscious leadership is finally making its way. I just have always been someone who's integrated the spiritual path into my leadership. From a place of conscious leadership, though, conscious is really about being aware, right? Consciousness is awareness. Leadership is influence. So conscious leadership is having a heightened awareness of what your influence is in the world. And with conscious leadership, self-awareness, well, really with any leadership, the superpower of any leadership is self-awareness. It just is. We can't effectively lead others unless we know ourselves, right? Unless we know how we're triggered, how we're showing up, how we see the world. how we see the world impacts and colors how we engage with other people, the decisions that we make. One of my most important books is The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. This is a book, when people ask me, what books do you recommend, what leadership books? I recommend The Four Agreements first and foremost. The agreements are: be impeccable with your word, don't make assumptions, don't take anything personally, and always do your best. And that third one about not taking anything personally, this is the root of all suffering, that when we take things personally, that's the root of all suffering. We don't need to suffer. When we realize that everyone around us is doing their best, and they're all engaging with the world based on their experiences and who's in their life and how what value they assign to themselves. That's what drives how everybody shows up in this world. And so then the way they show up in your life, it really is all about their experience. And so for a leader, for them to have this level of self-awareness and self-understanding, it allows them to be a much more connected, emotionally connected, energetically connected, spiritually connected leader. And that's what organizations need today. This is where the emotional intelligence comes in, the mental intelligence. What matters today is that employees feel seen and relevant and safe and heard and understood and connected, especially coming off of the pandemic, where everybody's reality was kind of shaken up. For leaders to be able to create environments where people are really going to thrive and be engaged, those people need to feel safe. And so this is part of the new 21st century leadership, going from commander to coach, right? Going from a director of strategy to a steward of strategy, right? Going from being just very self-focused to being globally focused. These are all new ways of showing up in the world. And that's what's required now. And that's why we have a conscious leadership curriculum.
And how do you find, like, are you attracting leaders within this that have never considered like consciousness, even emotional intelligence as a guiding principle in their leadership? And if so, how's that transformation been?
So surprisingly, and to our delight, the government, the US government, the federal government, and I have a big history with my first company with building a government contracting firm. So I'm very familiar with that environment. The federal government loves our curriculum. Like, they are embracing it, right? So we have the 5 I's, which is why my other company is called I5 Conscious Leadership. We have the 5 I's of conscious leadership: intention, identity, integrity, insight with a capital S, and then inspiration. And then we have a whole curriculum behind it. So we've got 16 different courses, but those are the 5 foundations. We are amazed at the way the government is embracing conscious leadership.
How did that first come to be? Like, what problems were they seeking to solve to actually, finally be open to some of this information?
We are working with an agency now where we are training, 35, 40 senior level leaders at this agency, and they have never had coaching.
Wow.
And these are people who have been leaders for 20 years, 25 years. They've never had any type of leadership development or coaching. Like, we're like the first.
Wow.
So I'm not saying it's like that in every agency, because it's not, but they are so, like, these training sessions that we do in person are so immersive, and we know how to create the container where people feel safe and they're vulnerable and they're sharing, and they're just fully immersed. Like, they love it. They love it. So it's really amazing. And they're having dialogues with each other, and they're taking things back to their team members, and they're really understanding the importance of creating a safe environment for those that they support. And it's really inspiring to see.
Incredible. And within, the witnessing of these transformations that are happening amongst the people you're working with, at what point do you start to understand, okay, wow, this person's EQ, their genuine emotional intelligence is starting to develop here, and this is going to create real change in the organizational culture and real change in their lives.
So we do the EQ testing where my partner and I are both certified in emotional intelligence and an EQ test that we are authorized to administer.
Yeah.
So we do for all of our leaders that are in the program, we do an individual, EQ test, and then we do a 360. And so then we debrief with all of these people and we go over all of the results that they had individually. So that shows how they see themselves from an EQ perspective. And then we share the 360 and they're able to see the deltas, in terms of how people are experiencing them.
What's the average in terms of like mismatching?
There's always a mismatch.
Yeah.
And there's always a mismatch, with the corporate culture work that I've done for the last 2 decades. We provide, we'll go into organizations and we do culture assessments. And the way that the employees experience the organization, it's always different from the leadership team and their perception of how people are experiencing it. But we level set that expectation, with the leadership team. We say, look, you're at the 50,000 foot level. You're not understanding what it's like in the trenches to be operating, right? So this is why it's so important to do this work, to get a pulse, get your finger on the pulse of where are the breakdowns, where are the disconnects. And even with my clients, I'm VP of culture and leadership for a medical practice in New York. And I've taught them how to do town halls, right? Instead of all hands meetings. All hands meetings, the CEO is just standing up there talking at the employees. Town halls allow employees to weigh in anonymously through a survey. And we asked the employees, what is it that we should be talking about in this meeting? What are we not seeing? What are we missing? If you have one question that you want to ask your leader, ask your leadership team, what is it? And we set up that survey anonymously. And then I get all of the answers and I compile them and present them to the leadership team, and they have no idea who said what. So we create the safe container for them to contribute. And then we structure the town hall agenda around what the employees think that we should be talking about, not what the CEO thinks that we should be talking about.
And so they're like official all hands that you're now kind of, supporting to facilitate every week. It's not like an additional meeting. It's their actual all hands meeting.
Yeah, we do it. I mean, it's quarterly or, every 8 weeks. It's not every week, but so I help with that. I mean, the leader runs it, the CEO runs it, but it's these types of touch points.
Yeah.
They're so important for a leader to have the humility, have the vulnerability to go out there to their people and say, what am I missing? Because I'm up here at the 50,000 foot level. I'm out, creating, being an evangelist for our company. You're in here executing the vision. What am I not seeing? So it's really important for employees to feel that they have a voice again, that they're connected to something larger, that their voice matters, that they're being heard. It's really important for leaders to set up these types of mechanisms that allow an employee to be vocal.
And what starts to happen, right, when the leaders implementing some of these things, the employees really start to feel like, wow, I have a voice here. My leader's willing to hear me. My leader's willing to flip the tables like this. What tangible change starts to happen within the organization and its culture as these strategies are kind of implemented and rolled out?
So that depends on how receptive the leader is. And that's where I'm coaching the leadership team, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, you are putting yourself out there and you have to be ready to respond.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to address every single thing that comes in on those surveys. They will be able to acknowledge them generally, and then we'll pick, a bucket of things that we need to address that are most urgent. But it's important that they follow through to say, I have heard you, and this is what I'm doing to implement. And again, it makes people feel psychologically safe and seen. So that elevates the trust in the organization. And then that will elevate the engagement. So it's all connected. And then that engagement impacts the top line and bottom line. Like we have the research that engagement absolutely drives the bottom line and the top line. So it's all connected, but the leader needs to be in a place where they are ready to ask, they are ready to receive, and they're ready to implement.
And so say they're like, okay, I'm at this point where I'm completely willing to be as vulnerable as is required. You know, I'm going to put it all on the table. I'm completely receptive. What starts to happen in a use case, if there even has been one?
Yeah, so things change, you know? I mean, not that things still aren't difficult, right? Like running a company is not easy, and the process of running companies is not easy. It's just things are, you know, things are complicated inside an organization. But if the employees see that the leader is making that effort to hear them, and they really are interested in not running a dictatorship, right? That they are trying to democratize a little bit, right? Like what's happening inside, that people have a voice. It just it improves things. I mean, I'll tell you, when I was running my company and I had that in place, that was where I always got the best ideas, right? Like that's where my ideas came from, my people. I was up here, I couldn't see. And it's interesting. I mean, I getting back to having two kids, every family has its own, what is called family constellation. And so every child in a family experiences their family differently. And I even noticed that when I was watching the videos, right? So if you're a firstborn or you're an only, you come into this world with like adults making you the center of their world. Like your whole frame of reference is, I'm the center of the world. And then if you have kids that follow that, they come into the world and they've never had that frame of reference. Like they don't even know what that feels like, right? That idea, that philosophy can be applied to a business, because you look at a business and there's 8 or 9 or 10 different functions, right?
And it's the dynamics of how all these constellations work.
Exactly. So like the people in your financial, department, they're only going to see the company from the perspective of numbers. Your marketing group is only going to see the company from the perspective of brand awareness, right? Your sales group is only going to see the company from the perspective of closing deals. HR, same thing. And all of them are right? So as the CEO, for me, having that awareness that everybody is looking at the company from a different lens, that is incredible knowledge that I can harness as a leader to learn about what I'm not knowing and what I'm not seeing. It's incredibly valuable gold inside the company.
I mean, totally right. And it's so obvious in a way. And so like where do CEOs in particular start to lose sight of understanding, these dynamics within their company? Where does this start to become convoluted, and why?
Yeah, when they get too disconnected from their people, when they get tired, when they get too in their own head. One of my most important mentors told me a long time ago that the greatest leaders subjugate their own agenda for the greater good of the organization. And so that is something that just always stuck with me, where I was checking myself, when things were difficult, and I didn't want to push through something, I would say, am I looking to further my own agenda, or am I really keeping the greater good of the organization top of mind? So I think that that's a really good check-in that leaders need to do. But it's very easy to kind of lose sight of, why, the purpose, the vision, the things that really make the DNA of the company, especially in today's world, because you go on social media and it looks like everybody is doing so well, and you compare yourself, and, you can get, it's a mind mess, right? If you start to get into that whole comparison world. So staying really, really connected to what your purpose is. And I just wrote about that in my newsletter that went out today, which is at Marissa International. It's all about joyful leadership in life. I just talked about the importance of staying connected to your purpose as a component of joyful leadership.
Yeah, crucial. I mean, actually, my next question was going to be, like the actual steps for a leader to start to become more emotionally intelligent and implement that into their workplace. Is it is it kind of taking the time? Would step one be taking the time to remember why you're doing it in the first place? To reconnect to that sense of, hey, there's a reason I started this, and there's a bigger picture at play.
So that's a very timely question too, because I've created a joyful leadership model, and there's 6 components: purpose, so that's your mission; potential, which is your vision; process. No company can run without process. You can know where you're going and what you stand for, but if you don't have process to get there, it's going to be a mess, right? Just like if you have really well defined processes that keep you running like a well-oiled machine, if you don't know where you're going, you're going to not get there, right? Because you don't have a direction. Right. So purpose, potential, process, presence. And this is where the emotional intelligence and the conscious leadership comes into play. And then people, which are your most important assets, internal, and then also making sure you have the right people around you, and then play. So creating a culture of play so that people have joy and they have fun, and that play creates teamwork and innovation and creativity. And so those are my 6 components, just from what I've learned over 30 years of building businesses and working with thousands of leaders, being in hundreds of cultures. It's purpose, potential, process, presence, people, and play. And that is the model for joyful leadership.
I love it. And I'm also reflecting as you're sharing this, how important listening is. That you can seek as a leader, as a CEO, to implement this strategy, right? But unless you're really listening and receptive to the people that you're working with, it can, I think, cause so much dissonance. And I know it in my own leadership journey. Like, if I'm sort of tunnel visioned, right, and my team is starting to feel like I've told you that 3 times already, and the what that creates in a culture, and in my mind, I just can't even recall when that conversation was happening. So that presence of mind, that ability to listen, which I
Presence.
is more of a, it's a spiritual quality, right? Like cultivating a capacity to actually be present with your people. If someone's listening to this and they're like, wow, I wouldn't even know where to start, to become a better listener, to become more present in my own life, let alone, with the team I'm leading, what are some steps that they can take?
So mindfulness, again, timing is everything. I just presented to the state of Maryland for their Office of Social Equity. They just granted 100 new licenses for cannabis dispensaries here. So they had me present on mindfulness and presence in entrepreneurship at their entrepreneurial boot camp, which I thought was amazing. And the reason they had me come is because that was one of the topics that was requested by these new entrepreneurs. So I talked about mindfulness, and mindfulness is really 3 things, Nicole. It's a state, right? It's a state of being that right now I'm very present with you. That's my state, right? I literally threw my phone in another room. It's nowhere near me. Okay. When I am taking a walk in nature, I don't take anything with me. I am fully present in nature, right? If I'm eating, I try very hard not to rush so that I am fully in that state of being present and aware when I'm eating. So the first thing is that mindfulness and presencing is a state. The second thing is that it's a trait. So once we can commit to being in states of mindfulness and presencing on a regular basis, it actually becomes a character trait. It doesn't just become something that we do, it becomes something that we are, right? And then the third thing that mindfulness is a practice. And it means that this is something that we have to intentionally do on a regular basis. I'm going to intentionally choose to be present. So if we can look at mindfulness as a state, a trait, and a practice, that kind of puts a little framework around the whole idea of mindfulness for people who might be new at it. And they can say, okay, for today, I'm going to commit to being present when I'm speaking to my employees. I'm committing to being present when I'm drinking a glass of water. I'm going to commit to be present when I'm brushing my teeth. I'm going to commit to being present when I'm walking my dog instead of doing a million other things. So working on the state first, right? Knowing that state of mind, we will eventually embody it as a trait. And then looking at different practices that we can do. There's so many free resources out there now. I mean, one of my favorites is Insight Timer. I don't get anything for saying that, but it's got tons of free meditations and breath work that range from a minute to an hour for everyone on the spectrum of their mindfulness practice. So just start with something and know that what works for you, that's all that matters. It doesn't need to work for everybody else.
Yeah. In our company, as we build in truth, we follow a model of the continuation of emotion, which is emotion, feeling, mood, and then eventually state. And that's a practice. That's taking control of yourself at every kind of juncture, and eventually building a new baseline. So I really resonate with how you're describing that. And personally really curious with tools like In Truth that are coming out, and I think not just our company but a lot of companies are now building biotechnologies that are able to now provide kind of insight into the internal state of the individual. I was having a conversation with my team just last week on how we kind of vision that biometrics and tools like this will eventually overtake traditional psychometrics. So it's really personal to the individual. It's your data rather than seeking to put you in an archetype or a box. It's hyper personalized. And with some of the organizations that you're working with, what do you feel the level of receptivity to that level, I guess, of exposure is going to be as this starts to become more and more popularized?
So I'm not an expert on this, so I'm just disclaiming that right now. But my initial reaction, as you stated that, I think that it's a balance. I think people are craving information on how they can live more healthy lives, right? Like there are things that are being talked about now that have never been talked about. People are definitely more open to new ideas, right? And that's all wonderful. And at the same time, I think that there is a fear around how much of my personal information is going to be out there, right? So I think it's finding that balance, making sure that people feel psychologically, emotionally, financially safe, having all of this type of information running around out there. But I really think people are open. I think people are more open than they ever have been to how technology can help us to live better lives, right? How it can create more measurements for our bodies, how we can use technology to bring down, blood pressure, cholesterol, heart rate, like whatever it might be, right? Cortisol levels, adrenaline levels, like whatever it might be. There's so many technologies out there that are allowing us to live healthier lives. But again, it has to be balanced with making sure that the information that we have to provide is protected. So that's just how that was my first gut reaction to your question.
Yeah, it's the conversations we have all day, every day. But the potential on the other side of that is this real capacity to understand and analyze the inner state, so that our depth of self-understanding and our depth of understanding of what it actually takes, the way that we co-regulate as a team, the way that we co-regulate as human beings in general, just how important that is. So rather than a culture where we're kind of pushing away this idea of emotion, but my hope is that it becomes this untapped potential when we know how to leverage it. And my final question for you today is looking at the global landscape, everything that we are going through as a world right now, things like exponential technological advancement, all the other madness that we're seeing, in the external world. What is the importance of integrity and emotional intelligence? Why does it matter specifically right now more than it ever has?
So we have to remember that emotion is energy in motion, right?
Exactly.
But what's happened in our world as a result of social media, people want replies instantaneously on their texts, right? Everything is like instant. We have forgotten patience. We've forgotten patience. I'm going to show you something on my desk. This is a little plant.
Oh, so cute.
It's a Joshua tree. And I was at a spiritual retreat in Joshua Tree, California a few weeks ago, and I picked that up. And I am getting so much joy out of watching this thing grow.
Yeah.
Like, that's 2 weeks worth of growth.
Mm-hmm.
And it just reminds me to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this world has just become so reactive.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a danger. It's just a danger. From a spiritual perspective, what's happening in this world is exactly what's supposed to be happening. It just is. Like, we have to break apart in order to come back together to elevate. And we are breaking apart right now in a lot of ways, with a lot of systems and a lot of structures, political, socioeconomic. I mean, there's a lot of pain right now in the world, a lot of pain. And it's exactly what's supposed to happen from a spiritual perspective. Like I said, in order to break down, break open, and then rebuild. We have been here before many, many times in civilizations. We're only going through it for the first time now as us in this lifetime. But we have been there many, many times. And Margaret Weekly has a book out called Who Do You Choose to Be? And she talks about that the breakdown of civilizations. We've been here. So, the role of emotional intelligence, the role of people like you and me, who are the light workers, right? Who are the people who are committed to elevating the love and the joy in the world. We are needed more than ever now to create the safe containers, to create the safe spaces, and to initiate the conversations, and to role model the importance of emotional connection and love and safety and belonging. We are needed more than ever to balance the dark, right? I started this whole conversation talking about the light and the dark. So we are always going to have the juxtaposition of the light and the dark. And many times it may feel right now that the dark is overshadowing the light, but it's not. It's not. There's a lot of light out there.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you turn the light on and the shadows go away, or the darkness.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
As always, I've completely loved this conversation. I think that there's so many key takeaways for you guys listening, and I hope you take some of those tips, those processes, and really think about how you can integrate this into your life and leadership, and remember that the people that you are leading, especially if you are an entrepreneur, come to work every day to play a role in building, your dreams and your vision. There's nothing really, I think, that deserves our reverence more, our willingness to be receptive and to listen and to be a part of their growth. So thank you for consistently doing this work, especially in places like the government. I'm very, very, very happy to hear that. And of course, we're going to post all of your links below, but maybe you can just direct people to the best place to connect with you and your work.
Sure. So Marissa International, and you can sign up for my newsletter there, which is all about leading joyful lives and joyful leadership. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn. So Marissa Levin 1, I've got a newsletter there too. And the other company is I5 Conscious Leadership. So the letter I, the number 5, and then Conscious Leadership. So find me on those, and I'm grateful, Nicole, as always, to be able to share my light and my wisdom with your community.
Yeah, we're lucky to have you. Thank you, Marissa. Until next time.
Yes.
If you love the show, please let us know by giving us a rating and tell us how to make this conversation easier for other people to jump into as well.